Welcome to Top Employers Inspire. We had 3 full days of sessions with our certified top employers for you to gain as many as possible valuable insights from the world of work. Top Employers Institute really wants to inspire with purpose. We genuinely want to make a positive impact on the world of work, and therefore we also share as many insights from our certified top employers as possible. Normally I would look ahead as what we still have on schedule, but since this is the last session, I'm just going to do a little bit of a recap. We went all over the world. We connected to Singapore, we connected to the United States, we connected to various certified top employers from Coca-Cola, UST, we are Dana International, and I'm already forgetting all of the fabulous top employers we had insightful conversations with. This one, to finish off, we have our very own CEO of Top Employers Institute, David Plink, and we've got Director of Research and Insight, Quinten van Es. And they will be having a nice conversation on the shift that is actually taking place in HR. So if you're curious, then please stick around, and I'm just going to hand over to David. He'll also be going to do the Q&A, and afterwards you'll see me back for a short little closure. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Wouter. What a pleasure to be here, and indeed today to finish up this fantastic insight-packed week that we had together with our top employers. And there's no better person to do that with today than with Quinten van Es, indeed, leading our research and insights for over a decade in various forms and really taking our research and our certification methodology to the next level. And by doing so, being exposed to everything that you've seen in the HR domain over the last decades. And that's coming together today in a topic that we will discuss, actually 2 topics, agility in HR and skills-based organization. So welcome, Quinten. Thank you for joining me. And could you just enlighten us a little bit more on the overall context of these topics?
Sure, David, and thanks for the introduction. I'm glad you did it, because I always feel a little bit anxious if I need to express or define what I'm doing. I think it's because I don't like to be put in boxes, and I think that's also a little bit the topic of today. If you look at kind of what is happening within the area of HR, already for quite some time, we have seen kind of the upcoming of agile practices in first in business in general, but then later also in the field of HR. And also kind of the upcoming of the concept of skills-based organization. As I said, it's already for quite a bit going on. But what we see now is that it's really getting mainstream. So I think that makes it an interesting topic for conversation. And specifically because it's so fundamental in terms of what it means for kind of how HR is looking to their own profession and adding value to the business. So I'm excited to discuss that more in depth today with you. So,
Very nice. And you mentioned it, both ideas are getting at that tipping point. They're not new, but they're getting to the point of being mainstream. What makes it so fundamental at this point in time that we put this on the agenda for today?
Yeah, we could easily choose to have a conversation on generative AI, and maybe touch on that later. But I think specifically if you look at what we are doing, certifying organizations based on best practices, we are normally not the kind of really, we're obviously looking forward in terms of what is coming, but we also look at things that are really proven, that have been proven successful and added value in multiple contexts, in multiple situations. And that's kind of what we really see with both the concept of Agile HR, service-based organization, that it is getting more and more mainstream. I think specifically relevant as we are through, I would say, even almost like a perfect storm, and then in the positive way of phrasing it. So it's a kind of, we have so many things going on at this time. So many disruptions and so many uncertainties that there is also kind of really a need to look at things differently. And that's what I think is, in essence, what is so interesting on those 2 topics. Because both are I would say, in essence, paradigm shifts. So it's kind of different. It's embedded different values, different way of looking at things. So yeah, and as you know, with paradigm shift, it's not something you just kind of switch to overnight, right? It's a kind of you go back and forth and iterate again and again, and every time you become more aware. And maybe you have heard of that joke about two fishes in the water, and the one asked to the other, well, how's the water today? And then the other fish replies, what water? And I think that's exactly where this is about. We are so much embedded in the kind of the old paradigm that we don't see it. So something to explore, and it's just to, for everyone to become more aware and prepared for the next step and the challenge in just getting a little bit level deeper.
I think that's a good metaphor to use, because we are not always aware of our surroundings anymore. We are surrounded by hundreds of attendees I know today, many of whom are interested in this topic. What makes it so important for them, these certified and aspiring top employers together, that we are hosting for this session?
Yeah, you can look at it from multiple angles, obviously. As I already referred to, from a business perspective, it's quite crucial, because it's important. Organizations need to be resilient, need to be adaptive, being able to cope with change. So that's one perspective. Also from an MPE perspective, the kind of the need and also maybe the necessity to become more human-centric. From different perspectives, there is clearly a benefit and a need to kind of adjust to almost like a mindset that better fits today's challenges. And when you look at Agile, both as well as skills-based organization, then you see that they really address kind of those needs, and they can be, and I think that's another important one. In a way, they are kind of mutually reinforcing each other. I think if you look at, and we are obviously talking a lot with clients around the world, and also looking at kind of the conversations our HR auditors are having with our clients throughout the year. What we see is that there is often adoption and implementation challenges. So maybe at HQ level, central in your organization, they kind of have embraced those concepts and ideas and come up with new approaches, but then it needs to be implemented across the organization. And I think that's where kind of the challenges often are. So I think that's what specifically for the audience might be interesting to learn from that, the kind of where am I in this journey, and hopefully they get a little bit wider perspective based on that.
Fine, I think we will look at the challenges a little bit deeper as well, but now we looked at the fundamentals, we looked at the importance. Let's dive a little bit deeper in each of the topics, beginning with Agile HR. How would you define the scope of this domain? What is in it? What makes it come alive?
You know, Agile as a concept, I think doesn't need a real introduction. We all know it's borrowed from software development and kind of spun over to other domains, also in HR. I think what is interesting is that although we all kind of understand the fundamentals of Agile, working in an Agile way, iterative, cross-functional, learn fast, I think it's specifically interesting that we see organizations taking all kind of different approaches when it comes to Agile. Some organizations just are choosing to kind of have an approach where they are focusing more on mindset, the values underpinning kind of Agile work, and really embrace that in the organization. Other organizations have a more kind of methodological approach. They just implement Scrum company-wide, maybe even without too much focus on the actual values underpinning it. And everything has kind of its pros and cons. And I think that's what is interesting, that what we are at today is that we see a kind of huge variation in terms of how organizations are dealing with Agile. And then at the same time, we still have often kind of just those old ways of doing things that are kind of limiting organizations to becoming truly Agile. Just think of a yearly budget cycle, which is often not adaptive enough to become truly agile. So I think that's what we kind of the field where we're looking at in terms of agile. Later on, I also will highlight some examples in terms of how you can move forward with agile. But I think that almost like summarizes what agile means today.
And one of the things that we discussed over the years already, what was interesting a few years back when we discussed these topics as well, is some of the reluctance within HR to adapt. It's like, how can you be agile in payroll? Because it's not a trial and error. It is real. It needs to happen correctly. So I think what you mentioned, the budget cycle, similar to that, right?
Yeah, it's not that because kind of you move to agile, then you are not serious about things that need to be controlled. But also there, even in areas like compensation, you see that kind of just the notion of having a kind of gather feedback and do something with feedback, and do quickly something with feedback. Also in that area is more and more becoming more and more common, and I think. When it comes to agile, it's also good to make really that distinction between a kind of agile applied to projects and agile applied to kind of more, let's say, the HR operating model.
Yeah.
So commonly we refer to agile in the context of projects. We're all familiar with kind of Scrum teams and those kind of things, but less common is really seeing it in the context of HR operating model. And I think that's specifically the interesting area. Maybe good to mention in this context is that a lot of organizations might be more agile than they realize, because what they are already kind of moved over the last years to kind of the habit of asking continuous feedback and acting quickly on that. So that's in essence it's an agile principle, right? So we see that happening already. So I think that's what makes it interesting. Also speaking with organizations, if we ask them, to what extent do you adopt that, they might not even be aware to what extent they're already applying those concepts.
Yeah, and I think that's what you refer to also. Sometimes it's more a semantics discussion than anything else. It's happening, but
definitely
there's a label to it.
Yeah.
Before diving into the next topic, I want to ask the audience as well to please pop in your questions in the not in the chat functionality, but in the Ask the Moderator section, so we can mix them into the conversation with Quinten. The second topic that we are indeed addressing is the skills-based organization.
Yeah.
Could you give some deeper context to that domain as well?
Yeah, sure. I think similar as what we see with Agile, it's a kind of really grounded in the almost like the fundamentals, more Tayloristic way of looking at organizations. Top-down, predictive, really kind of looking more in a linear way, as if we can predict and prescribe everything. Looking at a skills-based organization, for those not familiar with it, just a very high-level summary. Kind of it's in contrast to the notion that we organize work in jobs and we assign people to jobs as job holders. And that's the primary way as we kind of looking at work in an organization, and almost like define that as the currency of work in which you exchange. And so it's a very reductive view of work, but also of the individual. Skills-based organization, in contrast, looks at it more at a more high level of granularity. So really zooming into kind of the specific skills someone has, and specifically also looking at kind of the whole person there. So it's more human-centric in that way, but also from a kind of, if you look at it from a work perspective, it's kind of deconstructing work into kind of the core skill components where it's kind of comprised of. And by doing so, and understanding what skills are actually needed in this work, you're kind of shifting for, let's say, a work currency based on jobs to a work currency based on skills, which is much more granular, and by that you become much more flexible and adaptive, and that's where the potential lies. I think the challenge is mainly, that's as an idea very nice, but how are we moving forward with this, right? Are we now kind of just kind of more in the old-fashioned approach, kind of come up with these huge libraries of skills and assessing everyone towards those skills and make sure that all systems, processes are aligned with that skills library. And then we need to maintain it and make sure it stays up to date. And turned out that approach, kind of those huge kind of company-wide specific centrally managed skill taxonomies, that's almost impossible to realize. It might be possible in very stable, very structured and highly regulated environments where it's very stable.
Are there still those environments?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure.
That's exactly the point. So what you see is that organizations need different ways of looking at skills, and often that's I think I already mentioned how we see more adoption of both concepts. And also if you look at skills-based organization, that's translated not only kind of to the more, I would say, industry and economic discourse, but also in terms of vendor solutions. So vendors are building in those mechanics already in their solutions. So talent acquisition system that's able to match based on skills. Learning platform, which is primarily based on skills, those kind of things. But then it's a kind of vendor defined and often black boxes. AI, working on AI, and you don't know how it works, but it works, right? Yeah. And suddenly you get a match, and it's a good match. And so I think that's a bit the challenge. So organizations need to navigate that territory to see, okay, well, where do I want and need to take really ownership and control, and where can I trust solutions? And I think the frustrating answer at this point in time is there is no one right way. So it is. We are still in the midst of, let's say, a process where those solutions are getting more mature, and finally we need to get to a new way, new balance. And we're still in the midst of it. Yeah. So at this point in time, it's okay to have multiple solutions, multiple approaches. I think it's important that when you move forward with skills-based organization, that you know kind of why are we doing that and what context, and choose an approach that kind of fits with that why.
Yeah. I think what you're telling is also kind of resonating with something that Barack Obama said a couple of weeks ago when he was in town. On both topics, I think it resonates is better is good. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but anything that is better is good. And that kind of resonates with both topics for me. We put these two in one session for a reason. How do you see them converging? How do you see that they are reinforcing each other?
Yeah, in multiple ways. We already had that conversation just a moment ago about kind of the challenges to get started, and then better to do something. And I think that's really kind of the Agile approach. Just get into it, learn, and also fail, right? That's fine. But and then move forward, knowing with a better approach. And in that way, you gradually get to kind of better understanding and more effective solutions. So in that sense, kind of they both benefit from that kind of iterative approach. Mm-hmm. Another thing is looking at kind of the maybe connection to the both concepts is that they're both human-centric, right? Yeah. So Agile turns organization upside down. So it's bottom up instead of top down. So really values the individual as empower the individual as well. See them also as a whole person working in interdisciplinary settings. So in that way, it's really kind of giving room to the individual and being human-centric. Similarly for skills-based organization, kind of just if you have specific talents that are not something which you expect to have considering your role, then suddenly it can be recognized, and there might be a side gig where you can just apply those specific talents. So also in that way, I think as well, if you look at kind of the similarities between those two concepts, is that they are nonlinear. where for Agile, I think that's obvious because we don't know when we start exactly how it will go and where we maybe even end. As long as we have the objectives clear and on the radar. When it comes to skills-based organization, it may be less obvious, but also there, specifically kind of in the more mature organizations, when it comes to skill-based, they're very good in skill inference. So kind of identifying and detecting kind of what skills do people have, but also kind of what new skills are needed. And then often supported by AI, which is super capable in that sense. And in that sense, also kind of non-linear, because we can't predict what skills will be the basis of this match. That is something that then pops up suddenly, maybe based on very kind of new insights. So, and I think because it's a black box, that non-linearity is maybe not that clear to everyone, but it is clear. It is there. Yeah. So. If you look at a little bit deeper, hopefully I'm going to get too deep into this, but also considering time. But if you look at the AI solutions, instead of a kind of more taxonomy-based, it's called ontology-based. So it's taking into account not only kind of more a hierarchical view of skills, just grouping them into clusters, etc. But also kind of a more network view of skills. So looking at also kind of adjacent skills, context, those kind of things. And that makes it so interesting. And specifically now when those solutions are getting better and more effective over time, it can really help to get to unpredictable results. And as a result, help you to gain competitive advantage. Yeah. So I think super interesting to see those two areas in combination and as a kind of a strategy to deal with the challenges we are in. We are all in, I think, at the moment.
Yes, and then this implementation of these concepts also comes with other challenges. You already mentioned for Agile, it means you're turning the organization upside down, which is a stretch for many leaders.
Correct.
Do you see any other challenges with introduction of both agility in HR as well as the skills-based organization, specifically for leadership?
Yeah, you know, the leader becomes more a coach facilitator. So that's more. So in that way, it's a different leadership style. What's needed, more servant leadership. So that's one key change what we see, but also in terms of kind of what do you need from leaders. So they need to be visionary. They need to be empathic. So they're all different leadership threats that are suddenly becoming more and more important. So yeah, in that case, basically, it's the ability to to manage and navigate through changing mindsets that's becoming more and more important.
Yeah, navigating all that complexity at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Very nice. Yeah. Translating it to employees, because leadership is one component of the organization, but what are some of the benefits and challenges for employees and the overall employee experience that you see?
I already mentioned the kind of more the employee-centric view, specifically looking at a more holistic way of looking at the individual employee as a whole person with all their talents, where they even might not be aware of themselves. So there is their direct impact to their own development. Also from an employee experience perspective, if we have a kind of more fluid notion of work and matching kind of talent with work, then you can imagine that there will be just in general better fit. So you're tapping into that unused potential. So also there's a benefit. Agile obviously has massive implications in terms of improving the overall employee experience, as we have all seen by organizations with quick iterations, A/B testing, you name it, and then just quickly tweak and adjust the processes and services so that you just do it slightly better every time. And if you do that quickly enough and often enough, then it's just an exponential curve. So yeah, I think the benefits are huge, and I think specifically now in times of uncertainty, it can help to, if you know that you're in an organization that is adaptive and you're used to that as well, to become more comfortable with a kind of a level of ambiguity, I would say.
Yeah. There's a topic that's coming up in the questions from the audience, which I know you like, and it's a topic we discussed often.
Yeah.
So that's the educational system. And the question is, what's the role of schools and educational systems in line with skills-based organizations, and how do they adapt to educating that way? That's an interesting process. You see that with micro-credentials, for example, you see it already happening to some extent, but I think it's just still a long path before we are where we could be potentially. But ideally, you would kind of also break that down to the kind of the smallest individual measurable component, and being able to really kind of also demonstrate your abilities, even if you didn't complete a specific study or something, for example. There is obviously here a lot of potential, I would say, and you see it's happening already. Also, organizations not hiring based on credentials but based on skills, and that's already happening. Yeah. And famous example here is Google, who kind of also acknowledged that they made a mistake. When they started to grow, to kind of just relying more on credentials, and then performance dropped. So, and then they figured out, okay, well, how does that come? And then they said, well, actually, we didn't start it in that way, and that was for good reasons, and we maybe need to go back to kind of the old way, and really looking more at motivation and literally individual skills, independent of specific credentials. So and you see also in kind of in the education space that they're moving in that direction as well. But the potential is, I think, so much bigger than where we are today. Yeah, totally. And I think it's also a game of catch-up, because all these curricula are made in advance, and the world around us is changing so fast, and we're accelerating that only. Yeah. So that's hard to keep up with for educational systems.
Correct. Yeah.
You mentioned already a couple of times the rise of generative AI. Yeah. How do you feel that the impact translates into both concepts? I think already mentioned AI in the context of skills-based organizations, specifically the vendor solutions, which are based on AI. But they are not often based on kind of more machine learning rather than generative AI. Those large language models, such as ChatGPT. I think so. That is an area where we are still, all I think, very excited about. We're also in the unknown in terms of what does it mean, what will happen, and what will eventually be the consequence of that. And I think that in itself already underlines a kind of the relevance in context of being agile, and not only as for software development, but also as HR and as business in general. So there's just a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of complexity here, and being agile is just a prerequisite in order to navigate effectively in that domain. But also, if specifically, I think if you look at skills-based organization, I think the potential is huge. We have now those vendor solutions, which have I think in general, I would say, relative small AI engine, which is already tremendously effective. But imagine when the market is maturing, that grows exponentially. So that's it's hard to imagine how good and fluent kind of skills matching will become in the future. I think a consequence of that will also be that kind of dissolving of boundaries of organization, right? So that becomes easier to exchange talent, like also not only in terms of with the educational area, but also between organizations. So I think in that sense, there will be just a lot of new developments what we will come. I think we didn't spoke about that. Job displacement is
a serious concern as well. If you are already looking at your organization, work in your organization in a more deconstructed way, so looking at the individual component, you're so much better prepared to those challenges ahead and can navigate quickly in that domain rather than if you're still fixating mainly on jobs. In case organizations do that to some extent still, but they are organizations.
And there are roles that will disappear.
Definitely.
But if you have the underlying skills segmented more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think there's some questions still coming in, but before we go to that, any advice on how to get started? Because these are big concepts. And What is the pathway?
Yeah.
You have a silver bullet?
I wish I had. But I think I already mentioned, for skills-based organizations start with the why, and it's open door. But it don't start because it's the thing you need to get started with or whatever. There needs to be a clear reason or a clear business case. So that's my first tip. And if you know what you would like to achieve, what the challenges are, it's very a good practice to do a readiness value assessment. So look at the different domains and look at how ready am I to move into that space in this specific domain. Really do an assessment of that. And also in terms of the value assessment, same thing. Look at what can it potentially bring me in this domain. Well, and if you are ready and if there is huge value, then it's a nice, interesting area to get started in. So I think that would be kind of really good tip to identify areas for opportunity here. When it comes to Agile, and it applies also to skills-based organization to some extent, just start small, and specifically Agile. You know, there are different ways how you can start it. I think most organizations are already taking steps to more or lesser extent in that direction. But do it Agile. Really just get into it. Just learn. Not afraid to fail and just step up and do it better. And bring, if needed, some expertise outside in from other domains. That also could work. You see that the quickest way to, also the highest performance, by the way, is often people working in a different functional area. So why not putting someone from IT in who's used to working Agile in an HR project team, and then just to see what's coming out of that.
Yeah. Ignite it more.
Exactly.
Yeah, and also I think from leadership perspective, something I recognized when we went to a more agile approach, actually a full-on agile approach for the implementation of our ERP, I remember it's also the art of letting go. You can't control everything. It is upside down. And it's really
true.
Yeah, accepting that uncertainty. And if you don't, then it's really, really hard to progress.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you see some great shining examples out there that you can share with us, because best practices are what we're built on. So.
We have multiple, but I think it's interesting not to come up with the obvious cases, I think. So because those big shiny examples, we see them enough, I think, if you just read all the articles who are published. There are always the Spotifys and INGs of this world who are very advanced when it comes to Agile and basically want everybody to know about that. So I don't think that's new, but it is more. What I think specifically more interesting is the smaller organizations or subsidiaries with organizations which might not have access to the same level of knowledge. How do they move forward? Interesting example which I came across with is an organization that implemented kind of a new mindset or mindset for the future in some way across the organization, which is very much grounded in the fundamentals of working Agile. And they brought it to life with examples, behavior, everything, but also kind of skills that, and offered a training curriculum for that as well. And use that not only as kind of to support a cultural change within the organization, but also very small started building a general skills framework. And I like this example because it's so simple, and it yet has the essence of both concepts kind of included in it. So even if you don't have the budget as an organization or you are relatively small, you can already move forward in this direction. So that I think is an interesting example. Another one was an organization which did go through transformation, some kind of more business challenges. And they couldn't kind of really give the employees in the organization the career opportunities where they were looking after. Because they were too small, there was just not enough growth in the organization. So what did they do? They teamed up with some other organizations who had similar challenges and agreed on a kind of a talent marketplace and also based on skills as foundation to exchange talent across the organizations too. And that's, I think, another great example where you see really boundaries dissolving and creating opportunities for the individual to tap into talents which were otherwise not used, and maybe they would leave the organization. And in this way, it's you get to a much kind of more optimal state as an organization. So I think those are two
prime examples.
Yeah, nice examples.
One of the other questions I saw come up with had to do more with pitfalls. So you mentioned already, in everything you do, start small, don't make it too complicated. So basically the flip side of that, making it big is a pitfall. But is there anything else that you would say that we need to avoid?
I think common pitfall with Agile is that there's too much focus on the methodology and not on the values. And just the principles, because people don't feel comfortable with that whole domain maybe even, and just give me a method and tell me what to do, and then we do it like that. That in itself, you can work Scrum, but is it really Agile? You can really ask that question. So maybe it helps a little bit, but you're not getting really where you need to go. And we see a lot of organizations being stuck somewhere in the middle there. So that's a pitfall. Another one is when it comes to skills-based organization, is over-indexing on skills. So basically just flipping completely the other side and saying, now skills is our primary currency, so it's the only thing we are looking at. That's definitely a pitfall. So it's good as an additional perspective, helps to but it's not
the only thing.
No.
And you mentioned very clearly as well the adaptation of agility of Agile is also all about culture. So that's why it's so relevant today to talk to you within the HR community about this topic, because it all boils down to culture again. So I want to thank you, Quinten, for enlightening us on this domain, on these two topics. I think it was very insightful. I hope our audience concurs. You get to leave your comments as well. You get to leave a review of this. Really, thank you so much. We look forward to more conversations on this, and hope to see you all back online soon. And then over to Wouter again.
Thank you, gentlemen, for a super insightful look into the near future. It's not far away. I think we're making big steps to that, and it's amazing to see how strong the influence, the growing influence of HR is, and the impact as well. That was it for. Thank you again. That was it for Top Employers Inspire. I can't say how grateful we are for the contribution of the various certified top employers. It's been amazing over the last 3 days to have so many in-depth sharing knowledge and gaining insights for you as the audience. The contributors are in screen. We can show a couple of the logos. Obviously, the core of it all is sharing insights, and this is exactly what enables us and also enables certified top employers to accelerate the impact of people strategies, ultimately to enrich the world of work. That's what we're here for, and that's why we also very much enjoyed sharing this knowledge with all of you in the audience. Thank you for attending. Please, we've got 10 hours of Top Employers Inspire just of 3 days. We will make it available for you to get back to it in your own time and just make your notes and see what you can learn from everything we shared over the past 3 days. Thank you so much for attending, and hope to see you again live in one of our sessions.